Kristi Herold, welcome to Built to Sell Radio.
Thanks so much for having me, John. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Today's going to be a special episode for us because typically, as you know, we interview entrepreneurs who've sold a company. But the reason I wanted to reach out to you is because you're in the midst of not only building a company, but you're also doing that through acquisition. And a lot of our listeners are curious about selling to another business owner. They've considered selling to a private equity group. They've considered selling to a giant corporation, and they kind of see pros and cons to both of those scenarios. And so increasingly they're fielding calls from other business owners who are curious about whether there's a partnership or an acquisition in play. And so I wanted to get into your head as someone who's done some acquisitions, about how you think about acquisitions and why you chose that as a business strategy. But before we get too deep into that, I want you to explain the company. So what does JAM do?
Okay, so JAM, I started JAM in 1996, so 28 years in now. It was originally called the Sport and Social Club. I started it in Toronto initially as a lifestyle business, and it's adult rec leagues. So think of it as intramurals for adults, people who are no longer in college or university, they've graduated, but they still want to connect and have some, play some basketball or softball, ultimate frisbee, dodgeball, that kind of thing. So initially, that's what I started the organization as in 1996. And for 20 years, I grew it as a lifestyle business, had a great team, nice, steady, organic growth. I had 3 kids during that time. I didn't want to scale. I didn't want to own the world. I just wanted to have a great lifestyle business. And that was accomplished. By 2016, bored out of my mind, needed something different. And my kids were growing up. They didn't really want me coming on field trips anymore with them. And so I was like, I need a new challenge. And that's when I decided, hey, we should grow the sports leagues into some other cities. And we had done some organic growth. And I remember thinking, at one point I was thinking, maybe I'll sell this company and do something totally different. But then when I stopped and thought, well, what actually brings me the most joy? I realized what brings me the most joy is when I see people out playing soccer and flag football and softball. It actually it just fills me with so much joy when I know they're out there being physically active and having great social connections with friends because of the work me and my team were doing. So at the time, we probably had 50, 60,000 people playing with us every year. And I wrote down the number 1 million people playing. That was a legacy that got me excited, is how can I get 1 million people playing every single year? And I know it seemed like it still to this day seems a bit crazy. It seems like a massive goal. We're still a ways from getting there. But that became the new vision. I shared that with a couple of my teammates, my business partners, and I was like, they were like, sounds great, but how? And I said, I don't know yet. We'll figure that out. And so then it became looking at organic growth, franchising, or mergers and acquisitions. Organic and franchising both seemed a bit slow. And I knew there were already leagues like ours all over North America. And so then it was like, well, then how do you do mergers and acquisitions? And I'm a commerce grad. I did go to Queen's and study business, but I think I fell asleep for most of those finance classes. In fact, the words mergers and acquisition still brings up a bit of nauseous energy for me from those finance days at Queen's.
It's got a little bit of a Gordon Gekko kind of terminology to it. I got a bit of a vibe to it.
So overwhelmed me, the idea of that. And so I spent a better part of a year talking to people way smarter than me, asking, how does this work? What's the strategy here? Because what I didn't understand then was that you could buy smaller businesses for lower multiples and effectively roll up and sell for larger multiple. I didn't get that. And now, and I also didn't get that it was actually easier to sell a bigger company than it is smaller companies. I didn't know that. So once I spent a year learning a lot about that, a lot of breakfasts and coffees with smart people, started our first, started out on the mission of doing some acquisitions. And so between 2017 and 2020, completed 8 acquisitions, had 2 in the works right before the pandemic hit that would have almost doubled the size of our organization overnight. Pandemic hits in March of 2020. And we get completely shut down because you can't connect people in real life anymore through playing of sports. So we lost 18 months. During that time, we rebranded the company from Sport and Social Club to JAM. And we stayed true to the core purpose of the organization, which is connecting people through play. And we started doing corporate team building events. So we were doing virtual events for companies all over the world, things like scavenger hunts and escape rooms, like online escape rooms and game shows. And that has since morphed into doing in-person events. We do amazing races and field days and office Olympics. And we do these in-person events and virtual events for companies all over the world. So that's sort of become the second piece of the business now. We're also now have the sports leagues back and up and running, finally. We're bigger than we've ever been now. We've done 3 acquisitions post-pandemic. Our latest deal was we just closed on the Atlanta Sport and Social Club. So we're now in 25 different cities with our sports leagues and have about 50 full-time employees, probably about 400 or 500 part-time employees. And we are connecting people through play, whether it's adult rec sports or corporate team building. That is what Jam is all about.
I love it. And it's funny because I've had 2 social dinners, in the summertime, lots of kind of barbecues and stuff like that. I've had 2 where kids of my friends have come back saying, I've got a Jam summer job. So they're like refereeing some, like rec soccer games on the weekend, or one kid's doing
awesome.
Like in Kitchener, he's reffing, I think, so, I can't remember if it's, rec hockey or I can't remember, but it's a Jam thing. And
that's amazing. I love hearing that.
It's so good to see the growth you've had and the impact you're having.
The number of lives we are touching in such a positive way. It's just, I get, that's why in 2016, when I really thought about what is it that I really want, what's the legacy I want to leave? And I was like, why am I selling this? I don't want to sell this. I should grow this and touch more lives. And to your point, this past weekend, I'm at the cottage and my neighbor, I meet my neighbor's son, his new girlfriend. And she said, oh, I know your business. I'm a client and I play beach volleyball 2 nights a week and it's the highlight of my week. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, every time I hear that, it fills me with so much joy. So it's pretty fun what we're doing, selling play for a living.
Yeah, it's awesome because I think we all had experiences when we were kids playing and how much fun we got from playing, whether it was school sports or after school stuff. And then all of a sudden, it stops and you're like, well, wait a minute, I really enjoyed that. And of course, I never wanted to be in the Olympics or become professional, but I still enjoyed it. And you're making that happen. So I just love it. I want to get into the business side of things. So 2016, you are at this fork in the road, crossroads. On one hand, you got a lifestyle business. Is it generating enough profit that it's covering the lifestyle that you aspired to have? Was it, or were you still feeling like it was falling short of the money you needed to buy the cottage and have the kind of lifestyle you wanted? Just give us a sense.
No, lifestyle was great. Really, really good. And, was able to have a great balance between work and home and as much money as I needed to live comfortably and have the experiences that I wanted to have for myself and my family. So definitely had accomplished that. And some days I kind of go, why did I think I wanted to scale this again? Sometimes I question my sanity a little bit. I sometimes joke, I work harder now than I did back then. And I don't know that I'm making as much anymore, but but long term, I do love the challenge of what we're working on right now, the impact we're having, and I do believe long term, it's the right thing to do. Like what we're doing, what we're building through the M&A work has been pretty fun.
Yeah. So let's walk through how you sort of think about acquisitions, because I'd love to just kind of get inside those meetings. You said you spent a year in 2016, 2017 interviewing people that were smarter than you. What were the most...
Not hard to find, by the way. There's a lot of those people out there.
Very low bar to reach. No,
yeah, very easy.
What did you hear? Like, what did you learn that was the most surprising thing about acquisitions that you didn't know before you embarked on that journey?
I always think of, do you know John Eason?
No, I don't know.
No, John, he's from Oakville, which I think is around where you're from, or no?
No, we're Midtown, but...
okay. So anyway, John, I got connected with him, former investment banker, and he's actually been my advisor every step of the way since that very first, since one of those coffee meetings I had. And he explained to me that he was like, Kristi, it's actually a lot easier to find someone who's willing to divest of $100 million than it is $1 million to buy a company. And I was like, what? Really? Like, And he said, yeah, it's people. And now I kind of understand why, because I'm doing all these smaller deals. So much work goes into these deals and expense, lawyers and accountants and my, time and energy and the due diligence and integration. And it's a lot of heavy lifting. And so the companies with the big checkbooks, they're like, why would we dabble in that? We'll do the $100 million deals. And so when I learned that helped me understand why a smaller business is worth a smaller multiple versus, the larger multiple you can get on, that if you can, I believe at the time he'd said something to me like, if you can grow your EBITDA to be over 5 million, that's when you'll be able to get multiples that are much higher. And, businesses that are doing under 500,000, you might only pay a 3 times multiple, whereas you can get a, larger business would demand an 8 or a 10 times multiple, depending on the industry and such. So that realization was what clicked for me that, oh, now I get it. Like I didn't really know why you would buy a business at a 3 times multiple to just sell at a 3 times multiple. That seemed like a lot of work. Like where's the, the opportunity there. So
you saw that these smaller companies could be had for a lower multiple, but also that there weren't a bunch of other acquirers competing for those small companies that you might have somewhat proprietary access to them or be able to kind of convince them without competing with dozens of other potential buyers, I'm assuming.
Yes. And combine that with the fact that I also believe we could get some synergies by, if we're developing an email communication to promote the start of summer registration for leagues in Toronto, I don't need to hire someone to create another email for the start of summer in Sudbury and Mississauga and Kitchener-Waterloo and Grand Rapids, Michigan and Atlanta. Like you can kind of use the same communication, you know what I mean? Like marketing wise, finance wise, HR wise, there's just a lot of synergies to be had. So that was the other piece of it for me, was that for our business, that's where I saw an opportunity to sort of try and buy smaller, roll up to bigger, but also get some synergies along the way and deliver a great service. That's the other thing. I think that we've always referred to ourselves as the big leagues of grassroots sports. There's a lot of mom and pop organizations out there that are sort of one owner operators, or they're run by volunteers, and you don't get the best service. And we have our core values dialed in. We've got our vision dialed in. We've got our customer vision statement dialed in. And this is not just words on a wall for us. Like we actually really live and breathe this stuff and make our decisions around that. We really want our players to have a great experience when they're playing with Jam. We want them to be raving fans. And so I think that that's part of it as well, is that when we are doing acquisitions, I want to be able to say to someone who's built a great little business, hey, like this is amazing what you've built over 10 years. Do you see yourself doing this forever? If not, would you ever consider selling to someone like us who really cares about the customer experience and really cares about the employee experience as well, by the way? Like majority of the employees that have come along with any of acquisitions we've done are still with us if they fit the values and, they're performing. Because we want to have career growth opportunities for them as well. So it's felt pretty good. Like I think most owners that we've done acquisitions with, almost every one of them would be like, I think every one of them, I can confidently say would say that was it was a win-win. The deal was a win-win.
What kind of reaction do you typically get when you approach an owner with that pitch? So I think a lot of our listeners are getting those pitches and they're not sure who's legit, who's kind of a shady operator. And I think many of them have built up this sort of defense mechanism to dismiss them outright. Like, no, I don't want to sell, because they've been pitched so many times by, in some cases, unscrupulous acquirers.
Sure.
And so I'd just be curious to know, like, what's the reaction you get when you approach somebody and say, hey, have you ever thought about selling?
It's a great question, because I get those emails and those phone calls myself often. And I tend to do the like, who is this? And, are they really legit? And, and by the way, I'm not ready. So I tend to right now, I'm sort of just ignoring right now. But I'll be needing to pay more attention when we feel ready. Anyway, I've told a lot of people, every deal we've done, not a single one of them has had a for sale sign, right? Like these are not deals that I used an agent to find the deal. It's all been cold outreach. I know a lot of people in the industry across North America and I've developed a good reputation in our industry, having been doing this for 28 years, and we're one of the largest adult rec sport league providers in the world. So we've developed a great reputation, and so most of the people I've reached out to probably have heard of me. And if they hadn't, I just explained, like, this is who I am, and this is what we're doing, and this is our vision, is to, get 1 million people playing, and just kind of curious if you'd be open to having a chat and, about a potential opportunity. And majority of the acquisitions we've done have been 100% acquisitions, although we have had a couple that were partnership. So where we were buying a majority share. And so some people just outright blow me off, like ignore me, don't respond. Some people, will respond and have a curious conversation, and they're like, nope, not interested. And then many are like, sure, let's have a conversation. And of those, not all of them, sometimes we can't settle on a value. And of those that we settle on a value, majority have closed, but there was one that got, into due diligence. And I realized in due diligence, the numbers are not what you said they were. So we're not doing the deal. So like, it's a lot of planting of seeds before you can actually harvest, something. Right. So, but the approach has been, I think my typical outreach is, hey, are you open to talking about an opportunity? And if you are, then great, let's chat. And if you're not, no worries.
And do you characterize that opportunity and the breadth of things that you'd be open to, from, just partnership to acquisition, or do you make it clear in your outreach that your intent is to acquire their company? Like, is it more vague, or is it fairly specific in your initial outreach?
My very initial outreach is pretty vague. It's more like, hey, I love what you're doing, and this is what I do, and would love to chat with you about an opportunity. Because I don't want to scare people off by, because sometimes people go acquire and they get scared, and I can relate to that. So it's more of like, if I can have a conversation, it's like, do you have a succession plan? Have you ever considered, do you still love what you do? How many years in are you now? Like you're 10 years in. Are you still loving it? Are you a bit bored? Are you, do you have a plan for what's next? And have you ever considered a sale? And depending on the person, there's certain people that I know well enough to sort of know I want to partner. More of the deals we've done have been 100% deals where I didn't want to partner. But those that I know well enough, I would broach it differently, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I guess you're also using your own personal insight and journey. Up until 2016, you had a lifestyle business, and you were like, well, maybe I don't see myself doing this forever, this lifestyle business. So you were at that fork in the road. And if you had received that phone call from someone like Kristi, you probably would have been like, yeah, like, this is a great, so you're using your own personal, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Please tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it feels like
that's exactly it.
You're using your own personal experience. Okay, that's great. And so you get into these conversations, and you start to talk about their succession plan and their lack thereof. Do you start to nibble at the edges of valuation? Like, do you say, hey, have you thought about what it might be worth? Or do you try to draw them into some semblance of what they think they've got?
I mean, first, it's really been dependent. I mean, I've had so many of these conversations because I've done we've closed on 11 deals, right? So you can imagine the number. Like, it's been, I actually don't know. I should have tracked how many conversations that means. But have had many conversations over the years. And so depending on the reaction, I think when they hear, what I'm sort of proposing, would they be open to a potential sale or a potential partnership? If they ask me, like, well, what does that mean? I can give a range, but it's really dependent on, every region is really different. The gross margins in our industry are very regionally specific. So it's hard to do that, as it's much easier to do once we can see some financials.
But presumably you're using a multiple of EBITDA as the way you value?
Typically, although we're now starting to look at gross margin a little more because EBITDA is so, with these small businesses, I will tell you, after 11 deals, every single deal has been so unique. That is the one thing. The one consistent is that there's nothing consistent. It's just every single deal has been unique. And the way you think, well, this is such a simple business we operate. And yet every single operator does it differently, does it their own unique way, maybe with a different platform. Maybe so much of it's in their head because they're the only operator, or they've got 3 employees. And so they have systems and processes, but their systems and processes are different than, like, there's so many platforms out there that people use to operate their business. Some people are doing it on a cash basis, their accounting, when other people are doing it on a more of a financial basis, which, like, we used to do cash basis accounting too, and now it's much more on, we defer the revenue. And so it's like all these different, everyone's just got a different way of doing it. So I do need to look at the financials to get a better sense. And because the gross margins can be varied so much, because our biggest expense in our business is facilities. So if you can rent a facility in one town for, 4% of revenues, and in another place it's 40% of revenue, you can imagine it's a pretty big difference, right? A pretty big swing. And so it really does depend on the region, because every region has different, and inside a region, because we're talking public schools, private facilities, community centers, churches, cities, like we're renting from all different potential groups. And some places you get a long-standing contract and you automatically get historical use. I mean, just this morning in Atlanta, like half my team was dialing in, it's like a lottery 4 times a year, and you have to get there first and snag those points.
Wow.
So like every single region is different.
And so there's uniqueness in every deal you're doing. I want to go back to those initial conversations. Again, I'm asking the question because I think when our listeners start to engage with potential buyers, they have that sort of feeling out process, that first meeting or two where they're just getting to know one another. And so I'd love to give our owners a bit of coaching as what they can do to turn the temperature up for an acquirer. So like when you have those first meetings or two with a potential acquisition, like what do they say to you? What is their demeanor in their first couple of meetings that amplifies your appetite to make the acquisition?
That's a great question. Well, hearing that they've got clear systems and processes in place is really helpful. If everything's in your head, it's really difficult to buy that. Now we're a services business. We're not, we don't have bricks and mortar. So all we're buying is people and permits, really. And I need to know sort of how do you track your people, and and if you've kind of got this, like, oh, I just know in my head that I owe 10 people a refund from 3 weeks ago when there was a rain delay, like that's going to be a problem, right? It's sort of trying to I think if you can have systems and processes in place, one of those people way smarter than me who I would have talked to years ago would have said to me, regardless of whether you ever sell your business, you should always be building your business so that it could be ready for a sale, and making the owner of the business not important. Like I could go away for a year today, John, and my team, frankly, they would be thrilled. They would love to, like I actually said to Rob, my business partner, I said something about, I'm thinking of going away for 3 weeks in November. I thought it was only going to be 2, but I think it's going to have to be 3. And he was like, fantastic. And I'm like, you're not concerned? He's like, could you make it 6? Like they love it. They love it when I go away because I'm always creating problems, right? With my ideas and whatever. So if you can make your business operational without the owner there, that is hugely valuable. Like I could walk away from Jam tomorrow and day-to-day operations will continue. And so that's very valuable. The only thing I'm doing now is the strategic, the growing, the acquisitions, right? So that's a big one I would say for anybody, is try and get your business ready, that test it. Like, can you go on a vacation for a month and no one needs to call you? if so, you're probably getting to a really good position. Sorry, go ahead.
What's the opposite? Like, what would they say in that first meeting or do in that first meeting? They would be like, I'm out. No, thank you.
For me to be, I'm out?
Yeah.
Oh, if they throw out some kind of a crazy multiple.
What would be crazy?
I mean, I had someone tell me that, like they threw out a dollar figure and I knew approximately what their revenues were. And I was like, okay, if that's what you think your business is worth, like, no worries. Like we're pretty far apart. So like, I just know for a fact that if you're doing, $1 million in revenue, you're not worth 5 million. I just know that. Like, I know. So we can sort of end the conversation, but if you're open to chatting about value that might be more realistically, after I look at your numbers, might be more in this range, I'd be happy to talk. So, those kinds of things would scare me off, I would say.
Yeah. And so what's the range that you would keep talking? Like if like, do you give them a sort of a 3 to 5 times EBITDA or 3 to 4 times EBITDA kind of, that kind of idea?
Yeah. Like depending on the size, depending on the size of the business, that would be about right. Like a sort of a 3 to 4 if you're under $500,000 in EBITDA. Maybe 3 to 5 if you're under $1 million in EBITDA. If you're a little more than that in EBITDA, then maybe slightly higher, but not much higher than that. Like a 5 times would be sort of the top of what we'd be looking. And as but again, the EBITDA is really changes because so many of the owners take their salary. They kind of go like they just pay themselves whatever they need. They don't necessarily pay a salary. And so then they think, well, I'm earning this much. So that's the earnings. And I'm like, well, no, because if you leave, we may still have to hire someone to run those leagues. So there's actually your salary is still a cost to the business, even though you've gone away. Like we have to factor that. That's something that sometimes not all operators have understood. And those with employees get that more, but the one-person operators sometimes don't understand that. So they just look at it as how much they're taking out of the business every year as, that's how much they think is the EBITDA on the business. And it's not.
Right. Because you have to quote unquote normalize or adjust the EBITDA to figure out, okay, if Jane Doe is leaving as the owner operator of this league, then I have to hire
someone has to be on the ground. Yeah. You need, whether it's a part-time person or depending on the size of the business, if you can do it with a part-time, great, but depending on the size of the business, you might need a full-time person on the ground in that region. And I also try and tell them, look, there's other ways that the business is going to be normalized too. Like that car that you are, writing off, and your home office rent that you're writing off. Like you're probably putting some stuff through the business. You're probably making your EBITDA look less than actually what it is. So the normalizations can go both ways. And I really try. I've said this to so many people. I firmly believe if a deal doesn't feel like a win-win, it's not going to be a good deal. And if the owner that we're trying to acquire, if they feel like we're nickel and diming them, they're never going to be happy on a transition and that's not going to be a good situation. And vice versa. If I feel that, they're trying to nickel and dime us or whatever, like it's not going to feel good. So you want to really try and get to a place where it feels win-win. And that's not always possible. And that's okay. Right. And sometimes that's where deals, well, we're just not going to be able to do this deal. And that's okay. But the ones we have done have all felt win-win. And that's where it truly is. The transition is great. And we have a holdback that we've paid 100% of the deals we've done have earned their full holdback. Even when one of them wasn't actually supposed to be, like, we still paid it just because we were like, you're so close. You're so close to the number we had it to be at. And we're just going to pay you because I want them to feel like we weren't, they've built this business and I don't want anyone feeling like we screwed them around. But, and it was so, anyway.
How do you structure these deals as win-win? So we've talked about valuation somewhere in the 3 to 5 times, depending on the size of EBITDA, more for bigger companies, less for smaller. How is it structured from a win-win perspective? How do you deal with an earnout or equity rule, or what's the structure you use typically?
Well, I think coming up with, if they have a number in their head, and it's in the range that we think is fair, that's a good starting point, right? If they think that their business is worth 10 times that, we're never getting to that win-win price. So we can stop the conversation. But I've also, said to people, look, like, there's not a lot of people out there looking to buy adult rec sports leagues. Like, there's not, and we are doing that actively. And I also can tell them, look, like, you could talk to any one of the prior owners that we've acquired, and they will all tell you that it was a good situation. So I'm happy to give you contacts of people, and they would tell you that, right? And so that to me feels like the people we acquire tomorrow will be our future salespeople, because they'll help me convince other owners that we want this to be a good situation. And then, I really believe that business is relationships. If you can't maintain good relationships with people, then it's not going to feel like a good situation no matter what. And then, sorry, what was your?
How do you structure it? Is it like 100% cash at close, or do you do like an earn out, or how do you structure it?
Everyone's been, early days, they were a little bit different. Typically now they're mostly, typically about 70% down. Cash.
Okay.
Yeah. With a 30% holdback, there's some deliverables that have to happen. We need to get the permits moved over into our name. We want to have a smooth transition period. So there's some revenue targets that need to be hit, because, and they might say, well, I'm not in control anymore. And we know that, but what you are in control of is the goodwill and the word of mouth. So if you close with us and then you start bad mouthing us, none of your players are going to want to come and play with us. So we want you to have a vested interest in helping them want to come over and start to play with us. I mean, they're not coming over anywhere. They're going to keep going up to the same gym. They're going to get a Jam t-shirt now in the mail instead of, yours. And they're going to maybe switch to a different platform, a registration platform. But we need you as the owner to help massage this and to help spread good word of mouth. That's really what it's all about. And that's the part that I was saying, we've paid out 100% of all of those
That's amazing.
Even when we haven't had to.
And what's the length of time that the holdback is in place for?
1 year.
1 year.
Mm-hmm. If someone was open to doing longer term, that would obviously be my preference, but haven't been able to get many of those. So
yeah. And that 1 year holdback, is that all or nothing? Like, it sounds like there's
no, it's a formula.
It's a formula. Okay.
Yeah.
So they kind of reach a percentage of the goals. Like, did you get the permits? Great, check. Did you get all the sales go up? Yeah. Got it. Okay. And they can reach a range of different outcomes based on their success in that first year.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it's all, there's sort of that holdback is typically broken into sort of three different things. And one is legal obligations, which is kind of out of my control. And that's just making sure the reps and warranties, what they promised are really happen. And the others are more the revenue base, the permits and the people.
And how do you finance the 70% up front? Like, are you just taking money out of the company? Like, how does that work?
Yeah. Remember we were talking about that lifestyle I had? Not as good anymore. Yes, we've self-financed. A couple of the deals we did with debt from the bank, majority have been financed from our own cash flow. And that's part of, like, it's hard. Like, it's hard to kind of go, growth is expensive, and it takes there's sort of those steps, right? Where you're, as you're growing, and it's also, you get to a point like this, the deal we just did in Atlanta, that's a big deal for us. Like, that Atlanta is now our second biggest market, of our 25 cities. And so that was a good size deal. So it sort of slows down how much we can, unless we can go back to the bank and we can do bank debt, but debt's expensive right now, sort of more than what it was 6 years ago. Right. Yeah. But we may look at that right now. Like, I don't have any, I have nothing like close to sort of ready to close at the moment. I've got a few different deals that we're negotiating on right now. So depending on the deal, we may look at taking on debt. Maybe we'll look at taking on investors at some point, but so far we haven't.
And what are the toughest negotiation points that you find to be the stickiest to navigate?
Gosh, it's so dependent on the. Every deal has been so crazily different. I mean, valuation is probably the most obvious. Like, what is it? Can we settle on a number that feels good to them and feels good to us? That's the toughest one, I'd say. For most people.
How do you get there? If you've got an owner who is really married to a number, like they forever and a day they've dreamt of selling their company for $1 million, and they just will not go off that number. Like, how do you get to yes with someone like that?
I mean, we can only get there if we believe that the numbers justify it. And there have been a few deals that I've had to walk away from where I'm like, I'm sorry, like we can't. Your business is not worth what you think it is in our minds anyway. Like we're just not willing to pay that. And some of the ones I'm referring to, no one else has bought them yet. So, I'm not sure that those numbers are necessarily realistic. Having said that, also like there was one I'm thinking of that they gave us the number, which was higher than our initial offer. We went back and we looked at it and we sort of massaged some of our numbers a little bit. We were like, I actually think we can do this. It's a little more than what we thought we'd want to pay, but I actually think we can do this. So we gave them what they asked, and then they walked away. I was like, okay, really? Okay. So, and then other times, as I mentioned, you get to evaluation and then you start doing due diligence and it's all, the valuation is based on assumptions of, you're doing this much in revenue and you said you have this many teams playing and it's this much in EBITDA. And then we look at the numbers and the revenues don't even match. And it's like, okay, wait a second, like where were you getting your numbers from? So we can't do this deal. And in one case I said, look, what you thought you were doing in revenues, when we look at your QuickBooks, like that, it's not, those numbers don't exist. Like, I don't know where, and oftentimes smaller businesses, they've got multiple businesses in one set of books. And so maybe what they thought they were doing isn't necessarily accurate. And that's sort of the challenge in doing these smaller acquisitions on smaller businesses, is the books aren't always as clean as they are when you're dealing with bigger businesses, right?
How do you evaluate the books on your end? I mean, do you have like a forensic accountant you hire each time, or do you personally go through it and scrutinize the books?
I have a fractional CFO who maps out all their expenses to our model. And so then we compare, and when we have questions like, well, what is that exactly? And we sort of kind of figure out just where would that go in our model? And then that's where we can discover like, oh, well, that's interesting. That's what that $30,000 expense, it's their home office that they, it's their backyard gym they set up for their daughter who's a gymnast. Like, I don't know. And we go, well, clearly like that's not, we can normalize that. That we can justify. Or, so that's where we dig through all those numbers. And as long as if we can't model it to our own numbers, our own line items, then we would have to we could just assess whether it's something that we'd be getting rid of entirely, or is that an expense unique to that business that we'd have to carry on with? And that, then that comes into the valuation.
How do you evaluate? You've done 11 deals. I'm assuming as you've sort of evolved as an acquirer, you've learned more about the process of acquiring companies. So like, what does your model for acquiring companies look like today compared to what it was on that first deal 11 deals ago? Like, how is it different? What have you learned? What can you help us understand you've changed about your process?
I'd say I'm laughing because I remember the very first deal we did, and we were at the bank and we were signing over, paperwork together. And he turned to me, he's like, okay, so I guess you'll be at the games tonight. And I was like, oh shit, like what? Like, oh, you're not there. Like, and that's what it was like, oh my God, we need a transition plan here. Like that was, and luckily we started small. So, and I did that intentionally. Like there's a reason why we've done 11 deals, and the 11th deal is our second biggest market. Like that's, we've done a lot of smaller ones on the way up. Cause we were learning with everyone as we went. So our integration, plan gets tighter and tighter. Having said that, we have a checklist that we go through in due diligence, and we have this checklist that we work through in terms of our integration. But every single time we keep adding to that checklist. Like it's growing with every deal, because you learn, because as I was saying earlier, even though we're all running these are all the same style businesses, but everyone does it just a little bit differently. As an example, like, so in Toronto, we run leagues in the winter, we have our spring and summer, and we have our fall. And they're typically sort of 10 to 14 week seasons. And we have this registration period from this point to this point. And then once people start, then there's a little bit of a gap, and then we start our next registration period. Well, in Atlanta, they do 7-week seasons. And if you lose a week because of weather in Atlanta, like in Toronto, if you lose a week of weather, it's gone. Like well, in Atlanta, they would add on a week, and then they'd add on another week. And so then your registration periods are constantly changing. And so it's just different, right? And there's no right or wrong way. It's what they've done for years. It's worked well. But then it's just like, okay, so how do we integrate that into the way, for our marketing team's sake and sanity, and for how do we get the best efficiencies here and also keep our players happy? So there's just lots, like every single deal has been unique, and we learn from everyone. And I suspect that will continue to be the case.
You mentioned your diligence checklist. What is the item on the diligence checklist that causes the most deals to go sideways, or takes the longest for you to get, or is the most problematic for the business owners to furnish you with?
Oh, I don't know if I could say, like, there's not necessarily consistency between each. I think working capital is a tricky concept, has been a tricky concept for some, not all of the deals we've done, but for some that was a tricky concept, and they didn't understand
working capital. Maybe people may not have heard that term before, or are not familiar with it in the context of an M&A deal. So how does it impact the way you approach an M&A deal?
Oh, well, we sort of try and explain to the owner, and most have grasped this, not all. And so it just kind of created some explaining that, needed to happen after the fact. But the concept that, look, like, if we're going to close on October 1st, and you had leagues that started September 1st, and they're leagues that go September to December, basically the revenue that you brought in for this, you took it all in up front, because that's how our model of business is. We don't have accounts receivable. You bring all the revenue in, and then you service that revenue, and you have to pay for permits, and you have to pay for part-time staff and insurance and whatever. So we sort of try to explain, like, if we're closing on October 1st, the revenue and expenses related to September 1st to September 30th are yours. And then October 1st onward are ours. And they're like, but wait, like, all that money in the bank isn't mine? It's like, no, all the money that came in is not. It's deferred revenue. And that's where it can be problematic when people do cash basis accounting, and they don't understand that, they're still paying off something maybe in their minds from that they invested in 6 months ago using cash today. Like, so it's just, that's been a bit tricky on a couple deals, but most have understood that. And I think that idea of the deferred revenue has been tricky for some people to understand. And once you explain it, they're like, oh, like, I get, like, we just sort of have to sit down and go, just because you have that cash in your bank account right now, it's actually not, it's money that you need to pay for all the expenses that are coming, So once people understand that, it's pretty straightforward. But because they haven't done their accounting that way, it's tricky. And also, they look at, like, year over year. It can throw off the year over year numbers drastically, right? If depending on when you paid for your permits one year, versus paid for them another year, if you paid for them in a different month, it can really look different. And so that's why it's important that we be doing our accounting properly.
Yeah, no, for sure. We've talked about the working capital calculation on this show as the second most important number on any letter of intent. It's really important to know how the acquirer intends to calculate that, because it can flex the deal in different directions. Of course, for businesses that issue invoices and take 60, 90 days to pay, and those payments have not come in yet at the time of closing, it impacts the deal in a different way. So regardless of your business model, it's really important to understand what the
just be clear
calculation is.
Clear expectations, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. What's the future hold for Jam as it relates to M&A? I mean, you mentioned the Atlanta deal is a big one to digest. Once you've digested it, are you on a mission to continue to acquire? Are you going to slow down? What's the trajectory here?
I think we have a few more that we'd like to do. And then we'd like to get ourselves ready for a potential exit. And whether we ever exit or not, I don't know. But I'd like to get things cleaned up and really ready. And what I mean by that is really like start looking, we're focusing much more on revenue right now than we are on EBITDA at the moment for our own organization. Because growth, we've had to hire a lot of people to help with this expansion and the growth. So once we've done a few more, I think we'll really want to tighten up and get our EBITDA back to where we believe it can be. And then we're in a good position to sell if and when we want to, whether or not we will, I don't know. We'll see, but I suspect we will. I don't necessarily want to be doing this forever. I love what I do, but at the same time, I've been doing it for 28 years now. So at some point I'll probably be ready for a change.
Well, at some point you're going to cross the 1 million players threshold. So you'll have to. You've written a book which needs to be on every owner's bookshelf. It's called It Pays to Play. It's about creating culture inside an organization. Just give folks who haven't read the book 30 seconds on why you wrote it and what they'll learn from it.
Yeah, I refer to my book as it's the beach read of business books. It's like a great summer read. It's that easy chick lit of business books. Because it's fun and it's playful but it also packs a good punch. So the book is about how if we invest in fostering friendships amongst our team. Let me backtrack for a sec. I really believe that the core pillars of having a strong workplace culture are having your vision, your mission, your purpose, and your values clearly laid out. Those are table stakes. You need to have that clearly defined and not just written on the wall, though. You need to have those being living and breathing parts of your organization. And how do you do that? The only way to do that is having a connected, cohesive team working together to bring the vision, the values to life. And the best way to have a connected team of people is to make sure that people like each other in the workplace, that they're friends with each other, fostering friendships. And the easiest way to foster friendships is by having a little fun, playing together. So I talk in my book about how when we make time for play, it improves retention. So reducing your turnover expense, which is very costly to businesses, improves engagement. Like only 36% of employees are engaged with the work they're doing right now, which is kind of scary. It improves mental health and physical health. I mean, think of how often are people missing work because they're calling it a sick day, whether it's physical health or mental health. When you play, it actually improves both when you have some fun together. Creativity improves, and happier employees make for happier customers. So basically, the investment in having some fun in the workplace pays huge dividends on your P&L. It pays huge return on investment. And whether that's having a company sports team or having a company choir playing music together, having a book club that you meet once a month and discuss a book, or once every 2 months and discuss a book, having a virtual event once a month, or actually how you run your day-to-day operations. Like we press play to start every meeting we run at Jam. So if someone's in charge of having a 3-minute playful interaction, that's how you get to know each other and have friends together. So all these there's playful ways to celebrate and recognize great work being done in the organization. There's playful ways to run the day-to-day operations. And then there are playful ways to actually take breaks and enjoy getting to know each other differently. So the book goes into lots of these different ideas. And I have a little playbook PDF. It's called 10 Ways to Integrate Play into the Workplace. So it gives people ideas. And I've got a link for you, John, for your listeners. If you'd like to share with them, they can grab a copy of the playbook PDF, 10 Ways to Integrate Play into the Workplace.
Yeah, no, I think that's awesome. And you've shared that kristiherold.com/built-to-sell25. And we'll put that link in the show notes at Built to Sell. So folks can just go to built-to-sell.com, find Kristi's episode, and the link will be there for downloading that PDF. Kristi, I know people are going to want to get to know you on social media. Is there a better platform? Are you a LinkedIn person or Instagram? What's your favorite?
I'm mostly LinkedIn. I mean, I am on Instagram too, but I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so that's definitely a good spot. Yeah, it's Kristi Herold, Kristi, Herold, Herold. So definitely love to reach out and hear from people if I can help people in any way when it comes to having a little more fun in the workplace, or if I can share experiences that would be helpful when it comes to acquisitions. I mean, I really don't think I'm no expert, that's for sure. Just learned from a lot of experiences, but happy to share however I can.
Well, 11 deals under your belt. You're fast becoming an expert in this field, and I'm super grateful for you sharing with our listeners. So we'll put all of your contact information, your LinkedIn, as well as the opportunity to get the ebook in the show notes at built-to-sell.com. Kristi Herold, thanks for doing this.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to see you.